Hey, everybody, once again, this is the Angel Dog Podcast. I'm Brian. Again, my weekly series now, which I believe, John, we're on number 8 of John Seaman, a comrade of mine in our former agency under Department of Justice, that's U.S., by the way, DEA. We're both career criminal investigators, amongst other things. And I got to give it to John, is the one that came up with this idea of presenting to you, I've said it in the intro to these other podcasts, of the analysis of the Russian hoax conspiracy and where we're at today. And so far, just a real quick one-liner recap. What we did was we did background and summary points of the Afghan narco situation. That led us into Benghazi and Operation Fast and Furious with ATF. The role of the NSA in the unmasking and the role of the media in the silencing of whistleblowers. Number 4, the Fusion GPS and 7 CrowdStrike. Number 5, the Russian hoax conspiratorial agreement. The number 6, the Alpha Bank ruse. That's unbelievable. Number 7, the indictment and prosecution of a fine American individual, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. And tonight, John is going to cover the final big 5 summary questions that you can apply anywhere in your life. Who, what, where, when, why, and a wrap up of how again. Okay. And ladies and gents, anything you do in life, raising your family. Me and John are both fathers, the whole deal, right? We're commanders, supervisors, and under harm's way, right? And we both served here in Oconus, if you will. So with that being said, I want to throw in one stat. In the last election, 66.7% of us eligible voters voted. In 2016, 60.1. In 2012, 58.6. In 2008, 61.6. 2004, 60.1. 2054, 54.2%. The bottom line is this. After what John is done with his presentation tonight, it'll be up there, hopefully soon to be on X, will probably be one of the first places it's going to be on. It's on YouTube. Get out there, get with your neighbors, get with your coworkers, go over this stuff. John will give you at the end of this, if he wants, where he can be reached on Substack is one thing, right, John?
That's correct.
It'll be on Substack, and then have at it. Basically, all based on the merits of the law. It's not either one of us opinion, although I think I have to say I have developed some opinion more strongly since then. I'm sure John does too. And John is a passionate man. Man, can I tell you that, folks? He is one passionate man about this. Okay, with further ado, John, you want to add anything before I do the share screen with my technical genius?
Yes, before I get going, let me bring out a couple salient points. One is half the country right now believes that the justice system is working fine, okay? And I'm hoping at the end of this presentation that it'll open up other people's minds that we have a broken justice system, that it is not working fine. Right now, we're under the illusion that we have a justice system, and I'm here to tell you at the end of this presentation, I hope that you see, looking at the facts and what is said and what's presented, you do your homework, you make your own decision, but I hope you reach that conclusion that we're in trouble here, that the justice system is not working, period. The other is the ideological prism of how they did this thing, and that's one of the nice things we're going to do today is answer those 5 questions. Let me just tell you this, and Brian can astute to this, being a professional agent, just like me for our careers. Anytime a criminal investigator is able to answer the 5 W's and the how questions, means that they've established a prima facie case for investigation and federal prosecution. And saying that, that means that you have to actually do an investigation. And the difference here is all the stuff from Durham to Mueller and everything else is nobody has done an investigation from the origins to the current time frame. And that's what we're going to lay out today by answering all these questions for you so that you can see how you've been lied to, how all these federal agencies have been weaponized and politicized to do what? To go after you, the citizen, to take away your freedom. So that's kind of where we're at. And that's where I'd like to begin at.
Okay, John, let me share the screen. Open up John's presentation. And let me go over here.
Okay,
You
ladies
are
and
on.
gentlemen. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to do something here. I want to explain and give you a background on how did we get here. After Mueller's team came out and exonerated President Trump that he found no Russian collusion after spending over $30 million, I decided, as a criminal investigator, well, how is it that a fake Steele dossier, and how is it we spent $30 million with 18 partisan lawyers going after President Trump, that they couldn't find any Russian collusion when all the information from the media to foreign sources to all the stuff that you were presented over the last 7 years was all false. So going with that premise, I took that challenge to see how did this come about. So what I did was I did the same thing I did in Afghanistan when I was asked to put together the prosecution memo by DEA and DOJ to find out, was there enough evidence in 20 years of their investigative work to be able to put together a conspiracy case against the Taliban senior leadership? So in using the same investigative techniques and analysis that I did for them, which I wrote the PROS memo, which was a 240-page PROS memo with almost 1,000 pages of supporting documents that were submitted to the Criminal Division of Southern District in New York and accepted by them as an investigation, only to be killed by the Obama administration because for political reasons, because they wanted to negotiate with the Taliban to release Bert Dogdog. So in going there, let me take you through on how this whole thing comes together and answering the 5 whys and the how. One is I give a lot of credit to all the fine, outstanding reporters like John Sullivan, Sarah Carter, Paul Sperry, Greg Jarrett, Lee Smith. There's a ton of great people that spent, and Andrew McCarthy wrote a great book, Ball of Fire. There's a ton of great reporting done by them and also by a ton of great bloggers out there that have done outstanding work like Marco Polo, Technofog, and a bunch of other folks that are not criminal investigators. So you're going to get the preview of how to answer these questions through the prism of a criminal investigator. And that's what makes this podcast so different, is we're taking all the voluminous amount of information and boiling it down to what is the relevant information for evidentiary purposes of how it fits into a criminal case. That's the difference between this podcast and everybody else's podcast, because we actually put it together and explain it, how it fits into a criminal statute and what is the statute and what were the overt acts. That's what we've done in when we started this podcast with the first 7 by laying out the bricks of the wall. So let me just explain this to you. We've laid the bricks out right now. The wall is sitting there with all bricks. Now what we're going to do here is give you the mortar of how that wall solidifies and how it all comes together as a case that warrants investigation and warrants federal prosecution. So starting off, let's start with the who's. Okay, who's involved in this? Well, it starts off with President Obama conspiring with former Hillary Clinton, former Vice President Biden, now President Biden, along with the leadership of the former Federal Bureau of Investigation, James Comey, the Assistant Director, Andrew McCabe, the former Director of the CIA, John Brennan, the former director of the National Intelligence, Dan Clapper, and Attorney General Lynch in the Department of Justice, and other Obama loyalists and ideologues within the highest levels of the federal bureaucracy, where they're abusing their color of authority in weaponizing and politicizing the use of intelligence and law enforcement tools in a coup against President Trump, in destroying his presidency, but worse yet, destroying the culture and the values of the United States. Let's go to the what. And this is the important part, so you understand. What's the violation? It's a conspiracy to commit the offense to impair, obstruct, or defeat the lawful function of the executive branch and means to interfere with or obstruct one of its proper government functions by deceit, craft, or trickery. Now let's look at that, the deceit, craft, and trickery. What did they do and how did they do it? Manufacture of crimes. Alpha Bank, what did they do there? They got with big tech and they manufactured cyber tools to be able to spy on President Trump or give the appearance that President Trump was in contact with the Russian bank or the Russian government. They used the Steele dossier. What was that? And this is the best one of all because they used a person, Igor DeVecchio, who was under FBI investigation for espionage in 2010, and their investigation had determined that Igor had contacts with the Russian intelligence service. Well, what happened to Igor? Well, they closed the case out in 2011 because they thought Igor was getting on a plane with his family to Britain. However, Igor never left the United States, and Igor stuck around. So think about this, ladies and gentlemen. You got a guy, a Russian spy, under investigation for espionage in the United States, and the FBI, the premier law enforcement agency, just closes their case out, doesn't do any further action on Igor. Yet what happens to Igor?
What kind of operational plan that is, huh? Oh.
Yeah, but this gets even better, ladies and gentlemen. Igor ends up getting a traffic ticket, I believe, for a DUI on a government property in Maryland, and ends up getting prosecuted by who? Rod Rosenstein, who was the assistant U.S. attorney at the time in Maryland. You can't make this stuff up.
No, you cannot.
Okay?
That's good credit.
And Igor turns out to be the man who was the facilitator of all the information that went to Steele for the dossier. And he worked with Charles Dolan, who also was registered, who was a Democratic, fixer for the Democratic DNC, who was a registered Russian agent for the Russian Federation. And he's the one that gave the P-tape information to Igor, who gave it to Steele. And so that's all that went into this manufactured document. None of it, ladies and gentlemen, was true. Yet for 7 years, what did the media do? What did the Obama administration do? What did the Biden administration do? What did they do to this day? They still look you in the eyeball and they lie to you and say, Trump-Russian collusion.
Amazing.
Okay, he's an illegitimate president. So that pretty well should summarize it. Then we get into the trickery, the deceit, the framing of General Flynn. This one takes the cake. This is really simple to synopsize. You have a 3-star general who was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, picked and appointed by President Obama. He falls out of favor with Obama in 2014 because he realizes that they're lying about their intel reports, and he discovers that they're not telling the truth about Al-Qaeda's relationship with Iran. So he resigns. What do? They start from that point on, start investigating General Flynn in 2014, 2015, 2016. So now you get a flavor of what's going on here with him. Okay, the FBI case agent was going to close the case out and sent the closure in December because there was no evidence of he couldn't find anything of Trump or team members colluding with the Russians. And they kept the case open because Strzok, on orders from Comey and McCabe, kept it open for what? That's where they set up Flynn to get him to set up to make it appear that Flynn lied and tried to interfere on the Logan Act on when Obama put the 10 Russians on a list, and they tried to make it appear that that Flynn violated the law, which Flynn never did. Then we get into what? We go to jump here to 220. What'd you have in October? You had the 51 former intelligence officers from the Obama administration signed a letter saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. Talk about being disingenuous and affecting an election. They did this in October, 2 weeks before the election, okay? And then you had big tech and them suppress the newspaper story from the New York Post and kill the thing out to the public. That in itself should raise red flags to everybody. Then we get into the best one back in March when President Trump, he hadn't been elected yet, he announces his foreign policy team. What do? The FBI on April 1st opens a case on who? They open a case on Carter Page, who happens to be a CIA asset for not only for them, but also worked for the FBI and helping them out on a spy case. And then Brennan forms 2 task forces to go after Manafort, to go after Papadopoulos, to go after Page on the thing. So you get the picture show of how nefarious these people were. And then they started the op with Massoud off the thing. And this is all based on back from the Brits, who notified Brennan in 2015 that they were getting all these Synclet, and Synclet are wire information or wire communications are intercepted, where the Brits are saying we're intercepting Russian conversations talking about Trump's people. That's great. It's intel, but it's not evidence of any crime. They play this game between the intelligence agencies to get them to bite on if they want to do a false flag operation or set up to get them the agencies to bite on that somebody's crooked when they're really not. And that's how that began. And then the worst part is when Obama in 2011, he changes the whole national security deal by an executive order where he lessened the policies, which then allowed the easing where the agencies now could use the NSA tools to do what? To spy on Americans. And that's what they did from 2011 all the way up to Trump being president into his presidency. So that gives you the what by the trickery, the fraud. Now, this also includes dishonest service fraud. What do we mean by that? What did they do? The first thing they do is they use the classification system, okay, to hide their criminal acts. It's just like if you notice the double standard, what they use for Trump and what they use for Biden is everything's declassified on Trump, and yet everything's classified under Biden because they won't even give up the pseudo emails he used saying that they're presidential under executive privilege. Yet what they do on President Trump, they gave up his tax returns. They opened up his lawyers, all the stuff that he had. They said he didn't have the authority to classify. So that's to give you an idea of the double two-tier system. Then what happened? What did they do? The FBI told us a lie. They told the nation the big lie that in June, all this started from a a meeting in a bar between the Australian ambassador and George Papadopoulos, where allegedly Papadopoulos tells the ambassador that he was told by Massoud that the Russians had hit Hillary's emails. Okay, total garbage. Never happened. Why didn't it happen? Because when Massoud was interviewed by Mueller's people, he denied ever telling Papadopoulos that he ever told, Massoud ever told Papadopoulos that he ever had, the Russians had any of that. So you see you have conflicts, discrepancies by the premier law enforcement agency that started out this whole thing using the premise bar talk. Okay. Then you had the line to the FISA court. The next step, what did they do? They attempted to get a FISA warrant in the summer of 2016, but the judge said there wasn't enough evidence to do so. So they waited for the cases to be opened up on Manafort, on Papadopoulos, on Page, on there, and Flynn, and they used that information on Page to be able to lie and not put in there or do any due diligence on the information that he was a informant for the CIA. They left it completely out and lied to the FISA court. Okay. Then what did they do next? They withheld exculpatory information throughout all these cases on Trump and his people. All right. They left out the information on Papadopoulos when he had the conversations with Stephen Halpert, who was an FBI informant trying to do an entrapment operation on Papadopoulos, where he told Halpert exculpatory information that had he known or had been told by Massoud or whatever, that he would have reported that immediately. That never came out on any of that type of information. They withheld, Mueller and his team withheld information that Manafort and the gentleman they indicted both of them were high-level informants for the embassy in the Ukraine for over 10 years, giving information on the Russians to the US government. So you have to look at that. And then you have to look at it on Mueller's investigation in the Senate. Why didn't they ever look at, since it was to look at Russian interference in US elections, why didn't they look at the other Russian or interference by the Democrats? John Podesta and his brother Tony were partners with Manafort in business dealings with the Ukraine, with these oligarchs. They didn't investigate him or they didn't look at any of the Democratic DNC information that Chupla came over there and worked with the Ukrainian government to put out statements that Trump shouldn't get elected. They put out the rouge on the black book that turned out to be totally false. That was the information that got into the Mueller document, and they used to say that Manafort was corrupted with the prior administration. He got paid all these dollars and was corrupted. And it turns out that black book was all just like the Steele dossier. Total bullshit. So now you see
Give it to him.
from that
That's
state,
right. Basically, the bottom line.
that's the bottom line. Then what did they do? Then what did these people do? This is the best part. Then they leaked all the people within the intel establishment, the FBI and these agencies, who are supposed to be working to protect U.S. interests, starts leaking this information to the media on the Steele dossier to give the false impression that Trump was a Russian agent and he was corrupted, which then brings it up to where we are today of how you got a divided nation where one half of the country thinks Trump's a Russian colluded with Putin and is in his pocket, and the other half says we got screwed by a corrupt government. So that's kind of where you get the picture show at. But don't take my word on it. Look at the facts. It's all there. If you go to my Substacks, you want to deep dive on it. I've written numerous stuff breaking these down with all the references and there, so you can do your own homework and make your own choice. So what does this all come together at? Real simple. It's a violation of Title 18 USC Code 371, which is the general conspiracy statute where two or more people conspire to defraud the United States or obstruct the executive branch of government. It's the same. This is what's kind of ironic, ladies and gentlemen. The people prosecuting Trump are using this statute to prosecute him. The difference is the evidence is, as you see, they're the ones that committed the criminal acts. What they're doing with Trump is show me the man, I'll show you the crime. That's what they're doing with Trump. Next slide.
John, I was just going to move it, but let me add for the audience, exculpatory information we talked about before, exculpatory evidence, withholding goes, if you withhold it, it's against the defendant being charged. So it protects the defendant. So they're withholding it from Trump is the bottom line.
That's right. They violated what they did, what they've done with Trump here. And Americans better realize this, is they are violating his due process rights. Mm-hmm. And if they can do that to Trump, you're next. American
that's right, exactly.
And that's what you should be aware of. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a nonpartisan issue. This isn't a Democrat or Republican issue. This is a freedom tyranny issue. Ooh. Okay. So let's go into the where. They started in March 2016. That's where the FBI and the CIA with Five Eyes started their entrapment operations on Team Trump. Okay, utilizing the intelligence to do what? To set up perjury traps on team members to try to implicate them on crimes they didn't commit. Okay, and to give you a great example on that, when in the Mueller investigation, when they did their investigation, they indicted Papadopoulos and got him to plead out on his conversations with Massoud. Okay, but here's the thing. Papadopoulos' information never was acted on by Sam Clovis or people that Papadopoulos dealt with within the Trump team at the time. So Trump and those folks never acted on anything Papadopoulos ever said. He could have said, Hillary's got it all. They never made an effort to act on that. That is what you call exculpatory information, ladies and gentlemen. Right then and there, that should have ended or stopped any Mueller investigation from ever beginning. So now you get the gist of what these people did. All right, next.
I have a question again. Sorry. The Five Eyes Intel Network, you're talking about US, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, correct?
That's correct. And the main ones involved here were the Brits, because the Brits were the kicker that started this whole show off. They were the first ones to notify Brennan that they had intercepted Russian Synclan information, and they were getting conversations about Trump's people. Not talking, they never said what was Trump's people talking about, and they didn't put it in any context, only giving the appearance that there was communication between the Russians talking about Team Trump. That's all.
Got it. Thank you, John.
Now let's talk about the win. This is where it all begins. It begins in 2015. Okay, it continued in the 2016 election, and after President Trump was elected, it endures to today. This is what you call a continuing conspiracy case, no different than the Taliban case that agreed to start working with the drug traffickers in 1998 and worked up till current day doing the same thing in a conspiracy to do what? Deal drugs. Here, you've got the same type of conspiracy, only put it in simple terms. What was the goal of all these people? To destroy President Trump from being successful, period. They used they engaged with big tech, media, and put together an ongoing disinformation espionage case. And doing what? Promoting the Russian hoax to change the public perception that the 2016 election was illegitimate. That was bared out in the polling after the 2016 election, that 55% of the country believed that Trump was an agent of the Russians. So that shows you how effective that their disinformation campaign was, and is one of the reasons why we're at where you have a divided country where one half thinks they're patriots trying to save democracy, when in actuality they're the criminals trying to destroy democracy. That's the difference on what's going on. I want to use a quote that I think summarizes this pretty well. President Obama, former President Obama, in a speech at Stanford on disinformation declared, and this is important in his wording because words matter. The internet is a tool. Social media is a tool. At the end of the day, tools don't control us. We control them, and we can remake them. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen. What have they been doing the last 2 years after the 2020 election? Working with big tech to do what? Suppress information that has any kind of thing, like on the Biden scandal, COVID, or the Russian hoax, just as an illustration. Why did they do all this? What was the main purpose? Very simple: to defraud the American public by obstructing a presidency, the Trump presidency, to implement their Machiavelli plan designed to change America, to control it, to stay in power. And here's the third part I will put in there because we haven't really covered much of it, of redistribute and to gain wealth. Think about this. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, when they left the presidency, weren't multimillionaires. Today, they're worth over $140 million. The Obamas weren't millionaires when they went into office. Today, they're worth over $50-60 million. And then you've got Joe Biden, who didn't have a pot to piss in all the way up until he became vice president. And today, he's worth over $30 million. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can't make that kind of money. How did they do it? They're in government. Government doesn't produce anything. It doesn't generate income. So you've got a brain. You're smart people. You're out there working hard, trying to get ahead, pay the bill and pay the cost. This is what you're looking at. That's why they did what they did. They wanted to protect the Obama legacy at all cost for the reason to change America. Remember when Obama got elected? He said the key words, okay, and I'll never forget it. America's change is a-coming, and you're going to see major change. And I'll never forget that statement. And now I know exactly what he meant.
Spread the wealth around a little bit. Yep.
Next slide. Let's go to the how, because this is the important part. How did they do this? Well, they did it through putting together all their groups, the Antifas, the Black Lives Matters. They formed all that through the media to pit people against each other. We're a racist country, all that stuff. They did it 2020. The summer is a great example that illustrates this line right here. The violent protests, the property destruction by mob action. To do what? To change the history of our culture, our institutions, based on their radical ideology and political narrative to change America without ever considering opposing views and description. Because think about this, ladies and gentlemen, use your own eyes and everything you see today. They've gone after parents on their kids. In fact, one of the states just passed a law criminalizing if the parents don't recognize transgenderism, that the state can take away their kids. Insanity.
Mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling. If that doesn't put a scare into you, it should. Okay? Taking away in the old days, we used to have in the arena of free speech to be able to exchange ideas and then debate them, and then whoever had the best ideas, normally people with brains would vote for whoever had the best idea. Today, that no longer applies. This is all done emotionally. If you notice, what are the emotions they play? They play the fear card, okay, and the racism card, and the gender card. To do what? To divide and conquer. And that's why it explains why we're here today. I do not believe most Americans are racist. I don't believe most Americans hate each other. I think most Americans have got themselves in a state of funk where they've been inundated with so much disinformation that they've now become brain dead of they can't decipher what's true and what's not. So I ask you, as an American, please do your homework, think about, because the next election, you're going to be the one that makes the choice what road we go on. Then you have the media and the current Biden administration, the Democratic Party. What did they do? They viewed the Republican Party as the enemy and the former president as the enemy. And the Republicans as extremists, and any group that doesn't agree with them were extremists. They gaslighted political differences by calling for prosecution, and that's where we're at today. You've got a former president being prosecuted by state attorneys, federal attorney, for what? By who? In an orchestrated lawfare program using legal theories, okay, to prosecute political differences. This is insanity at its best. And I believe if this ever comes to fruition, it goes to the Supreme Court. I believe the Supreme Court will toss every one of these cases out, because regardless of what these left-wing loons in these law professor universities and lawfare and that Lawrence Tice says, these guys are left-wing radicals. Their theories do not stand up to the Constitution nor the law. If you follow the law, they don't have a leg to stand on, okay? Then they use the big fear, the big lies, and the fear campaign. Again, we talked about this, I think, about 2 segments ago, on how they, just like we use the example on what Hitler did to bring together the German public. He needed to have foils. And who were the foils to bring the German population together that was in a deep depression? How did he do that to unify them, to believe that the Nazis were the supreme race of the world and that they had a goal to take over the world?
And would take care of the people.
Yeah, what did he do? He vilified them. And that's what these people have done. He vilified the communists. He vilified anybody that disagreed, Christians, Jews. And that's why you had the situation you had, where it illustrates man inhumane to man. And that should be the danger signal to every American. I will throw this out. There's a great old movie made in 1940 called The Mortal Storm. It's sometimes on Turner Classic Network. If you ever see it, I recommend it. It illustrates everything that we're talking about here on how they use the lie and fear. And it mirror images exactly what you see on a daily basis today.
John, that movie is in the U.S. or was it?
Yeah, it's in the U.S. It's funny because it has a ton of stars in it, like Jimmy Stewart, Warren Bond, Robert Stack, Dan Daly. Man. I mean, it's got about 8 major stars when they were all young. But it is such a pertinent movie because it covers the issues of book burnings, science. You can't have an opinion. I'll give you a great example. Remember how they use COVID, that if you don't get a vaccine, that you're going to kill everybody and whatever.
Again.
Yeah. Well, in the movie, they use the premise where the Nazis' premise is that if you're of German blood, okay, that you're superior to everybody else. Where the professor teaching the class said that's nonsense. Blood is blood. There is no such thing as superiority in science. And yet, what did they do to him? They vilified him, and then they threw him in a concentration camp. And I'll just leave it there. So that way you get a whole picture show. It's a very great movie to watch how the power of the state can be used against and criminalize its citizenry that used to be normal and is no longer acceptable. Next slide. The media portrayed all these people in all these bureaucratic agencies. And I think we covered that in the beginning, way back when, in explaining how did Obama and Holder, what did they do? They took the National Security Division and they changed the guidelines, and then they took control of who could be hired. And for the last 8 years of administration, he inundated the federal government with all these radicals that thought like them. So that gives you a picture show of why you have throughout the whole bureaucracy of all these ideologues that think they're patriots. They're protecting the system. That's their mindset, okay, from there. And it gives them a perfect cover where the media is making them to be the patriots, and that anybody that opposes them are the unpatriots. And that's how they do it. Very, very simple. Then you had the convergence of government, big tech, big business. And we saw that with the lawsuits in Missouri. You saw that where a federal court just ruled that Biden administration cannot suppress information that's free speech. And now you're starting to get some of the courts that finally getting some of the good judicial things to uphold the Constitution. So it gives you a really good opportunity there. And then you had how they did the disinformation campaign, circular reporting. I explained this on one of the podcasts in depth. They took the Steele dossier and they took the intelligent community assessment, which was manufactured, okay, and then they used those as the two primary documents to circulate to senators, to media outlets, to everybody else coming from different directions, having like the Brookings Institute circulated, Democratic senators, Republican senators that hated Trump, media types. So you had all this information that came into the FBI that gave the FBI and the CIA coverage of the information to say, oh, wow, this is independent information, so hence it must have some credibility, so hence we must investigate. When in fact, it was all from the same source, same information. Okay, just as Durham said in his report, there was never any legal predication for any of the investigations on Team Trump, period. Next slide. I explained this one, they use the executive orders to reorganize the national security system under the Patriot Act. And this was a key point I covered way back when. I would go and Google Glenn Greenwald or go to my Substacks because all the references are there, pull up his 3 articles he wrote. He does an outstanding job that explains how they did what they did. It's well worth reading. After you read that, then you'll understand how they were able to use the Patriot Act and the tools of the NSA. One thing I want to say about this is the FBI had a contracting unit all these years there in the NSA that was collecting all this information. And when Mike Rogers, the head of the National Security Agency, found out and asked for an audit, and they found out that they violated the law, and the FISA court found out that they had, the FBI pulled the unit, and the unit took all the information out of the NSA. And to this day, nobody can tell us who this contracting agency that the FBI employed is. Who are these guys? And where'd all that top secret and classified information go out of one of the most classified areas in the U.S. government? This is something for, I hope the House members on the committees are listening, because this is one of the first things I'd be doing is asking, who are these people and what happened to it?
How obvious and simple. Go for it.
Yeah, very, very simple.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. And then again, I explained how they used the classification system to hide the criminality. And what did they do? They made the Russians the responsible party to do what? To deceive the Congress and you, the American public, that it was the Russians that were behind all this. When, yeah, I have no doubt in my mind that Vladimir Putin had targeted the U.S. in every election. I have no doubt. And that's one of the reasons, ladies and gentlemen, that back in 1984, they formed a unit in the CIA to counter Russian deception and to prevent them from interfering in our elections. That unit had been operating for 40 years, all the way up to when? March 16th of 2016. And that's when President Obama got rid of the unit. Why? Why? This is a question somebody needs to ask him. Why would you get rid of the only unit that was tasked for the U.S. government to counter Russian interference on our elections? And then the best one is if you remember in August, when all the Democrats and the administration was claiming the Russians were doing all this cyber stuff and bots and interfering, the intel agencies asked them, hey, we need to counter some of this. And President Obama told them to stand down. So it kind of goes against where you can see Obama and his administration didn't really believe the lie they were putting out that the Russians were behind the elections, when in fact they were using the Russians as the party to do what? To be able to use the Hillary Clinton, their nefarious plan to go out and destroy Trump. Because remember, in July 16th, the British government told Brennan about the intercept, about they had intercepted Hillary's plan. They told Obama, they told Brennan. What did Brennan do? And then they instructed or told Comey and the FBI to open up 4 cases on Team Trump when they should have shut down the whole thing. So it gives you a good picture. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, why you need to have the next administration, if we're going to restore the rule of law to the nation and get your trust back in your system, why the next president needs to appoint an attorney general, put together a team of prosecutors and agents, and finish and get to the origins and get this all out in the open, because this is the only way to kill this cancer cell. Because if we don't kill this, we don't have rule of law.
And you won't have anything. Well, no structure will be gone.
That's correct.
Structure will be gone. Be anarchy. Really?
Next slide.
Okay. Something else, Mr. John, something else.
Yeah. Okay. What did they do? We told you in the beginning what they do. They manufactured crimes. Alpha Bank, they made cyber tools. They manufactured the Hoax and all the hoaxes in the Steele dossier and the Shear dossiers. They've tried to frame General Flynn with the Logan Act. They manipulated the Intel Community Agency report when President Obama put out an executive order to expand it out to 17 Intel agencies, when only 3 were the ones that put it together. And Comey and McCabe wanted the Steele dossier put in the body of the ICA, and that's the only thing Brennan objected to. However, Brennan put it in the appendix, and that's where Mike Rogers and all these stand-up Intel analysts that refuted Brennan's analysis and basically opened up and said this was all political, that the Russians didn't want President Trump. They wanted Hillary Clinton. Why did they want Hillary Clinton? Very simple. Go back to 2011, 2012, the scope of the scope when Hillary was doing the reset button with the Russians. What did they do? They went to big tech in Silicon Valley. They got big tech together with the Russians to build a Silicon Valley in Scopovo, the city. So they were given all that big tech cyber capabilities to the Russians, which years later came back to haunt us because the FBI in 2014 warned, and the military intelligence warned the Obama administration that this was going to be a national security matter, and it sure was, because what did the Russians were able to do? They were able to have access to our universities. They were able to get our technology, and they were the first ones that developed what? Hydrosonic missiles. Where do you think it came from? It came from us. They were the ones that were able to get it and then develop it first. So it gives you a great example of what the deal. And then the manufacturer letter that was Russian disinformation, which did what? What did the three things do? The 2016 on protecting Hillary was to what? It affected the 2016 election. The 2020 election was affected because what? They hid the Hunter Biden laptop. The polls show that if the nation would have known, the percentage of voters would have flipped and Trump would be the president, Vice Biden. And then you have today where you have the people out of the former Obama administrations who were all part of the original, this Russian conspiracy. They're the ones in the Biden administration, and they're the ones colluding with the U.S. attorneys and these state prosecutors to do what? Prosecute Trump, to keep him from running for president for one reason only, because they know if President Trump were to win, all this criminality comes out, all these people will be held accountable, and that's why they're doing what they're doing and why they're panicking today. That's where we're at a nation. You don't have to believe me. You can do your research, but facts matter here. Okay, so they hindered us from learning about the Steele dossier. They never told anybody that it was research from Hillary or the DNC. They hid that for us for a year. They hid DeVecchio. Think about this. They took a Russian guy like Igor, who was allegedly a Russian espionage agent, and they made him in February of 2017 a FBI source, paid him money to hide him from Congress and the public, that he was a Russian agent. So think about that, ladies and gentlemen. That's what they did and why they did it. So this nonsense where they come and they say the FBI, it's only a few rogue agents. This isn't a few rogue agents.
It's a
This is the
ministration.
culture.
Yeah.
This is the culture, as I has explained,
Right.
of what they did. They put all these ideologues within these agencies. That's why you had former FBI director or assistant director and one of the agents that left a year ago, and she came out and said they changed the FBI from a law enforcement agency to an intel agency, and the culture has changed where you have all these people that think like them, okay? And all you have to do is look at the taxes of all the agents that they have, of all the information. You have Kleinsmith, the guy who lied on the warrant, Viva la Resistant. He's upset because all the work that Obama had done is going to go down the tubes and he needs to protect it. So think about that. This is what it struck smelly Walmart guys. We got a deal. You had Eric Camellia say we need to do Flynn and his buddy who went to work for Mesco, Sean, I forget his last name, who went to work for Adam Schiff on the impeachment trial. So when you look at all this stuff, this all didn't happen by happenstance. This isn't, when you look at it, you connect the dots, you see how it comes together. Like I said, all the hows that we're explaining here, think about it. The first part was the whys, that was the wall. Now the hows is actually the mortar concrete that goes into the wall. And now you've got a foundation and a solid wall, which shows you from a criminal standpoint is you've got a case, a prima facie case that needs to be investigated and possibly prosecuted on, depending on what the venues and what the statutes are still applies. Then you got they applied the tools of intelligence and law enforcement. You don't have to take my word. You can see it every day, what they've done by doing search warrants on parents, school boards, listening in on, look what they did on January 6th. You took a small amount of people that should have went to jail for hitting police officers, but you don't take the 900 and something that were just there and then making it called an insurrection. If that's an insurrection and that's their definition, well, then I would say the summer of love, we've got 20,000 people we need to lock up tomorrow.
According to the ground.
Yeah, if we're going to use that definition, well, let's see. They killed, I think there was over close to 100 some people killed during those summer riots, over $1 billion of destruction, a federal courthouse, a federal church, all things destroyed. So let's be fair, folks. If you're going to apply standards, apply the same standards. That's all I'm saying. If you want to have a country of law. And then the failure to disclose the exculpatory. This is the real key point. The Mueller investigation, which was verified by the Durham investigation, the findings were there was no collusion by Team Trump or Trump with the Russians, period. Now, this is what I'd like to blow up with all these media types that lied to the nation on all those reports. I think the New York Times, two guys, one polos that used unanimous or anonymous intel people. Remember think about all the reports you read, ladies and gentlemen, from the media. Anonymous source in the high-level anonymous source in the intel community has verified the Steele dossier. They verified conversations on a deal. Let me just tell you this, ladies and gentlemen. If the Mueller investigation, if the Brits or anybody had Russian intercept conversations with Trump people or Trump that implicated them in crimes, they would declassify them, and that would be your evidence, and we wouldn't be talking today. That's all I'm saying. It was all a ruse. And if you like being bamboozled, that's why I call this a crime of the century. Here is how they did it. And then lastly, President Obama, the FBI, the DOJ, the CIA, everybody knew early on that the Steele dossier was a Russian disinformation and opposition research paid by Hillary Clinton's campaign. Yet the FBI lied to the court, obtained 4 FISA warrants from the FISA court to do what? Spy on President Trump's campaign, and continue to investigate Team Trump with no legal predication, so that it evolved into the Mueller investigation.
Awesome.
Okay? Think about this. They never, ever, President Obama in that January, I'm going to summarize this, in the January 5th meeting, when he instructed Comey not to tell President Trump that him or his team were under investigation, I would call that obstruction and failure to transfer presidential power when they had no evidence at that time to justify hiding that kind of information to do what? Because they wanted to use that to destroy Trump's presidency. So when that's how you get to Mueller, and then you walk it up to current day, and that's where we're at today. So it gives you a pretty good idea on that standpoint.
John, let me ask you, do you, and this is speculation probably on maybe both of our parts, do we believe that 50% of our Americans are really dialed in as to what has happened then, and now they realize that? Do you think that they're dialed in?
No.
I don't either.
I don't either. And that's the reason, Brian, why we did this podcast.
Yeah.
We've laid out all the factual information. We backed it up with documents in the Substacks. So if people want to go take a look and do their homework, it's there. Don't take my word for it. Look at the docs, do your research, but it's all there. And that's the reason why we're doing this last podcast, to summarize this whole thing. Let me close this out, because the best way to close this out that I can say to the American public is this. Look at the arrogance of these people in charge today. What do they tell you every day? Okay? They tell you we're in charge and there's nothing you can do about it. Okay? Let me give you 3 examples that are the best examples that I can give you, because in the old days, one of the best things under the old evidence rule was if you wanted to convict somebody, you would get them in their own words telling you what they were doing. Okay. And I gave this example, I think, in one of the first podcasts. That's how Giuliani brought down the mafia, is he read the book of the capo that was able to retire in Tucson and use that book as an outline to train the agents and the DOJ to verify how the mafia was organized. And that's how they did it. Same thing applies here. And let me give you these 3 articles. The first one is in May 16th at 2:16. When you ask, how do they control the media? Go read that article. Ben Rose lays it out clearly on how they control the media. It's one of the best articles written. He says everybody wanted to get access to Obama, and they basically, Rhodes basically, to paraphrase, said we told them what they needed to know and they would take it from there. So they basically parroted what the Obama administration wanted accomplished. And that's what's going on today, because I believe there was an email leaked out yesterday, Biden doing the same thing with the media as an illustration. The second one, the resistance on Trump. I believe in June of 2020, there was an article in the Vanity Fair where they admitted how they rigged the election. This Mary Ball, I believe, actually they explained how they did it through the voting, through all the money from Facebook, through all the deals. They all got together, big tech, and they actually explained in their own words how they did the rigging. If that's not evidence, I don't know what is, but it has to be verified and corroborated, but it at least lays out from their own words, not my words, their words on the left. And then the last one, which is, I think, really appropriate, is the article in the Atlantic with James Baker, and I believe it was 2022 or 2021 in June, or not June, in February, where Baker basically tells the author that they were going to do everything in their power to protect the system against Trump. Now think about that for a second. He's the head legal guy for the FBI, and you got them discussing how they need to protect the system from Trump as if Trump's actions are illegal. So Trump never had an opportunity. That's why he had all the resistance within all these agencies. And I think we covered that in one of the podcasts, and we documented all the documents from all the different players within the agencies of how Obama formed the resistance movement. So now you get a clear picture show of how they did this thing. So it's just not to the leftists out there. I'll throw this out to all the people in lawfare, to all the leftist law professors, Larry Tye especially, anyone else out there, any of these former AUSAs that claim that that Trump has violated federal laws and everything else. Let's sit down and have a discussion on who the real criminals are, comparing this to what they're doing. And I bet you not one would ever take this up, because the facts and the truth are on our side. So that's the challenge I throw out to them, because I don't think they've got the guts to do that, Brian.
Well said, John. Well said. Do they not have the guts? Where are they going to find the people, because of what you talked about before, the F word, fear? Where are they going to find that? They can't find a proper defense attorneys to take on Trump's cases. Right?
No, it's I've never seen anything like it.
Never.
And that's why, to close it out, is, ladies and gentlemen, 2024 is the most pertinent election since the 1860s of the Civil War days. Mm-hmm. This election is going to determine what course, what path we take. Do we go down the path of restoring the rule of law, restoring your freedoms, or do we go down the path of tyranny and one world government? You guys are the deciders. You get to make the determination. What Brian and I have done, and I thank Brian immensely, it's his broadcast system and his podcast that gave me the opportunity to lay this stuff out. I just hope that you take the time, you do your due diligence, do your homework, and then you make the decision on what the value of the information is.
John, I cannot say, in all honesty, it's you, my friend. I'm just a platform, and thank you very much for that compliment. But ladies and gents, you can see the passion in this man, and he didn't even need any slides to do it. He could have done it from cold memory, stone cold memory. And his work that he's done over the years, because he's been so intent on doing it. People, the F word, not the most common F word. How about the F word for freedom? We're losing it every fornicating day. You're losing it when you put Alexa to answer your freaking doorbell and you can turn on your lights from 3 states away. You're giving up your freedom because everybody, they in tech are listening to you, are watching you. Okay. Now, does that present you with a case? You're raising a family. I don't know what percent that is these days. You're raising a family, you're paying your bills, like John says, and you don't want to get off G and pick up O and go, right? That's understandable. But at what point could we say in history that if the revolutionaries circa 1776 didn't do that, where would we be today? Where would we be? Hitler offered the people protection and freedom, and everybody had a car, and they bought it, and look what happened. Millions of people perished. Millions. Travesty. Well, John, I tell you, I'm not a pessimist. Anybody that knows me out there knows I'm not. I'm a realist. When you do 34 years on the front line, like we did, of state, local, and federal law enforcement at the highest levels, you have a ringside seat to the game of life. You do. Okay, you do, as a soldier or a sailor in war, right? You have a ringside seat. I got to say, I don't know where this is going, because in my day job, I see other things. And I don't know if I have the confidence in my fellow Americans. I don't. And me and you are at a different stage of our life. We're now 40 years old.
That's correct.
And I get that. Well, what will you, the father and the mother of 40-year-old with 3-year-old kids, where are your kids going to be when John mentioned a state that makes it now against the law for a parent to not step in on a child's gender change? Am I right? That's only the first one. How about New Mexico, where is it the governor that decides that nobody can carry a gun? How about enforcing the fucking law? Okay, we both did that. We zero tolerance. Enforce the effing law against the thugs on the street. There's plenty of law dogs out there, man, woman, that would go out there gladly and enforce the law. Okay, no, well, there's going to be civil violations. Taking the guns off the street to save you from being killed in a drive-by at a Quaker Steak and Loop? Are you kidding me? It's unbelievable. People wake up. So I say, wake up. Wake up. It's going to be over. John, again, I thank you. I hate to I'm not audience. Neither one of us can control our passion, right? I mean, and at our age, what do we care, John, right? I mean, at this point, at this stage of the game, they know where to find me and John in about 3.2 seconds. There's no question in my mind.
Brian, you made the salient point. The salient point is this. These people, the FBI, all these people in the government bureaucracy, they're hired to work for you to uphold the law. And today they're not doing it. You have the opportunity to put an end to this nightmare if you ask yourself this one question. How can you restore the rule of law? If you can't restore the rule of law, then we don't have a country, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh.
And you really want to live under the illusion of this, where every day you've got media telling you one big lie. You know it's a lie. You see it's a lie. We cannot go on like this. Something has to break. It's in your hands. I trust the American people. I trust that American people will do the job, because Americans or have character, at the end of the day, they end up doing the right thing. And I think a majority of us love our country. They love the value for what we stand for, and they don't want to be a third world country.
No,
So I'll leave you with that, Brian.
Beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. People, again, we wrap it up. This series is unbelievable. Peace, if you can find it. It's getting smaller every day. The L word stands for love. I know John's got it, okay? And, well, I don't want to comment on the love too much. And the final thing is you got to have some of this, man, whether it means protesting at the local level or I won't go down the other road, but you know what everybody out there knows what I'm getting at. Thank you, John. Really take care of yourself.
Thank you, Brian.
You again. Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.